Brian Hanni, the voice of KU Athletics, joins us on 365 Sports with Paul Catalina, Craig, and David Smoke as we take you up until 6. Brian, thanks for your time. Expectations for KU in football at probably near an all-time high, and it's deservedly so. They've earned that, but it all comes down, do you agree with the health, and can Jalon Daniels stay that way?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. You've obviously done your homework. It's clearly a preseason of anticipation levels that we haven't seen since the late Mark Mangino era. People forget that Mangino won 20 games in a span of 2 seasons back in 07-08, including a 12-1 Orange Bowl championship season. But then the wheels fell off the wagon right after that, and there was a kind of a player, treatment scandal that led to his, separating of ways with the university, and ultimately Kansas fell into a cycle of about a decade and a half after that, where they tried 5 different coaches to try to get the train back on the tracks, and finally it stuck with Lance Leipold. And for just the second time in school history, and the first time since that 07-08 stretch that I talked about, KU's gone to back-to-back bowl games, and this season has a chance to, for the first time ever, make it 3 straight years of bowl eligibility. But obviously, with a team that brings back this much talent and has a chance to be in the mix for Big 12 title consideration and college football playoff inclusion, bowl eligibility is just kind of a baseline level expectation, which sounds crazy to say for a program that was down and out for over a decade, the lowest rung on the Big 12 ladder. But they've got their sights set sky high here in 2024, and plenty of reasons to feel that way with the momentum that Lance Leipold has built in just 3 short years here at KU.
Have you guys got any insight on Jalon Daniels' specific back condition? Is it something that they feel is chronic, or is it something that they feel that now, with all the time he's been shut down, he will have healed from?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. He's full systems go at this point, and really embracing all of the preseason hype and expectation levels, and knows that this team will go as far as he can take them. Last year, obviously, Kansas had a great advantage in having Jason Bean waiting in the wings, and he stepped in and saved the season when Daniels went down. And as Smoke alluded to there at the start, it's a situation where Daniels has only averaged 6 games played per season over his previous 4 years. So we know for this club to compete for the Big 12, to have a chance to even be in the conversation for the college football playoff, you got to get double-digit starts out of JD6. And that's obviously easier said than done. But right now he feels great, looks great, has an outstanding attitude, and knows opportunity is knocking for him personally and for his professional future and all that, but also his legacy. Obviously, he's brought a lot of excitement to this fan base, but how he'll be remembered is largely about to be determined in these next 6 months. And, is it going to be a case of a guy who flashed brilliant potential but never was able to fully realize it due to the injury bug biting so often? Or is it a narrative where he finally puts it all together, has that storybook season where he's able to play, for the full 4 months, and Kansas does something historic? We're hoping it's the latter, but obviously a lot will have to go into that. And Kansas certainly is preparing behind him with Cole Ballard, who we saw, have some big moments, including the Kansas State game and Texas Tech games a year ago. And then obviously Isaiah Marshall is a really highly recruited freshman that comes in that we feel is the future of this program. Hopefully a guy they don't have to tap into until 2025. Meaning Jalon Daniels had a very successful and healthy senior season.
Brian, they are loaded at running back. Quarterback, they obviously feel good about. Wide receiver, they feel good about. I know the offensive line is still a question mark, but losing Andy Kotelnicki, Jeff Grimes comes in. We obviously have seen him the last few years. That wide zone plays right into what they're already doing up there at Kansas, and so it's not like he's coming in and starting from scratch necessarily, but it will be different. How different do you expect? What's been kind of just the thoughts on Grimes this spring and what they've been focusing on offensively as they welcome him in?
Well, he's been obviously a treat to work with. I know you guys experienced that firsthand. Just a first-class guy. He's got plenty of great innovative ideas, but he's also smart enough to know that if something's rocking and rolling as is, you come in and you make little adaptations and augmentations to it, but you don't reinvent the wheel. And those were his own words. He's not going to come in and turn tables over and completely start from square one with something that right now is rolling, and almost all of your skill position offensive talent returns. They lose Mason Fairchild, the starting tight end, but otherwise everybody's back. And so, yes, he will put his own wrinkles into it. There will be variations that look a little bit different, but a lot of the similar concepts that have worked for Kansas the last few seasons will very much still be in the mix for KU here in 2024. But you alluded to Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw in the backfield. Neal has a chance, should he stay healthy, to leave this season as the school's all-time rushing record holder, to leave as a second-day NFL draft pick perhaps. And while he was the number one rated prospect in the state of Kansas coming out of Lawrence High School 4 years ago, not many would have thought he would have accomplished this much heading into his senior year, and realistically could have gone pro at the end of last season. Highshaw is a guy who'd be an absolute star on most teams, but there's probably 4 or 5 teams in this Big 12 that have an embarrassment of riches at running back, and Kansas, for a change, is one of those teams. And he's a guy that forms a great 1-2 punch, a guy that can run through you and bounce off you and bulldoze you, on top of what Devin Neal brings as a little more shifty guy back there. So it's a really nice problem to have with 2 very capable guys you want to keep fed back there. But honestly, the running back depth goes much, much deeper, and it's probably one of the deepest parts of this Kansas team. So a lot of excitement in the backfield, no doubt, but so too with the receivers. They love what they have, obviously, with the tight end group, even without Fairchild, with guys like Cardell and Casey coming back. So the skill position talent, the playmakers here are about as good as I can remember since those 07-08 days I referenced earlier when Todd Reesing was throwing touchdowns to Kerry Meyer and Desmond Briscoe, and you had multiple NFL-type players, Derek Fine at tight end. It's as good as it's been since then.
All right, so we know that Lance Leipold's ridiculous record at Wisconsin Whitewater with 6 national titles, played for a 7th, lost, 6 games in 8 years. Had to rebuild Buffalo, but he did. It got hot at the end. And he knew what he needed to do, or at least thought he did when he arrived at Kansas. What makes him, in your opinion, so special?
Well, I think he's done an amazing job of building a culture here that guys want to be a part of. You hear that all the time, and it sounds so cliche and coach speak, but it really is true. When you're a program like Kansas that's trying to climb out of, as I said earlier, being the lowest rung on the Big 12 ladder for over a decade, you got to convince guys at the onset that you're building something special. But then once they start to get some notoriety and recognition and start to make some headlines, then you got to find a way to keep them. And Kansas has done a brilliant job under Leipold of being able to keep the vast majority of its stars. And certainly they've been competitive in the NIL landscape, but this was a program that late Les Miles era was losing all its best defensive players to SEC schools, and you felt like, man, rich get richer, poor get poorer. We see KU basketball capitalize on that all the time, but is KU football going to be this, vultured program where they get picked apart every year just as soon as they get something fancy and shiny and new that another team might covet? Leipold's developed a culture, and I give Matt Gildersleeve, his strength coach, a lot of the credit here because Coach Leipold does, in getting these guys bought in, believing in what's going on here, and then wanting to stick and stay because the culture across the board is so good. And on top of that, there's a lot of great things going on around this program. This team this season will be displaced and have to play away from home because they're building a brand new $450 million football stadium. And you guys can speak firsthand knowing the effect that can have on a program when you have excellent facility upgrades. And so, it's been an exciting time to see the tangible success on the field, but the culture he's created, the continuity amongst the coaching staff. I mean, prior to losing Scott Fuchs, our O-line coach, and you mentioned Andy Kotelnicki, the OC earlier, the previous offseason, they didn't lose a single coach, coordinator, or staff member. First time that happened at Kansas in over 20 years. And so the coaches are staying, by and large, the players are staying, and it's led to momentum just kind of building off each other, one game to the next, 1 week to the next, one season to the next. And that's just not something we've been able to sustain historically. It feels different this time around, though, guys, because Lance has turned down multiple opportunities to leave for quote-unquote bigger schools. And now we've got the new stadium on the way. They're hoping this season's on-field success will continue in that upward trajectory coming off 9 wins a year ago. And if that's the case, why would you leave? Because he's got a great chemistry and rapport with his athletic director that hired him, Travis Goff. He's been given everything he asked for at every turn at this point, and he's delivered on everything. So they love him here. They'll build a statue for Lance Leipold if he wanted it, amongst his fan base, that is. And so just, keep on building as he has been, brick by brick, piece by piece. And so long as the key people in terms of relationships, AD, chancellor, head coach, assistants stay in place, they've got a really good thing rocking and rolling right now. And they feel like that continuity and that momentum can be sustained maybe for the first time in school history.
What is the thing outside of Jalon Daniels' health that is the most nerve-wracking for the team, or I guess the biggest question that they have not solved yet?
Well, I think we were a little concerned heading into the summer on what was the pass rush going to look like, and they've had some progress in that regard that I can't speak to specifically until guys are signed and on campus since I work for the school. But they've done very good in recruiting, in shoring up the pass rushing department, where they lost Austin Booker probably a year earlier than they thought they would. He ends up being drafted by the Chicago Bears. And he was a breakthrough all Big 12 star in his lone season as a Minnesota transfer. And so that was a concern. They also had some concerns on the offensive line based on a couple of departures and then a spring injury, but those have largely been addressed as well. So, again, you don't know until you line it up the first week of August and start to see what it's going to look like. But in the trenches, there were a few holes you could point to. And obviously losing Scott Brooks to the Tennessee Titans, our line coach, that's going to be interesting to see, how they do without him. But I think by and large, from a personnel standpoint, you like what you have at most spots. And it's not quite as, you used the term scary earlier, or concerning, as perhaps it was with some unanswered questions in April or May. So shaping up to inter fall camp, feeling pretty dang good at just about every single spot.
Brian, it was a new year for the Big 12 last year, a year of transition, 4 schools coming in, 2 schools on their way out. Now the 2 schools are out, the 4 schools are settled in, and there's 4 more new ones rolling through now to join the party. Who knows what 5-10 years down the road looks like, but just what do you make of this Big 12 as a league, and what are you maybe excited for? I know that you can't, scheduling-wise, go see every single spot necessarily in during the football season, but what stands out to you, and just what do you make of kind of this mutant Frankenstein league it's turned into these past couple of years?
Well, I, for one, am excited about it. If you're going to have change, which no matter what field we work in or aspect of life we live in, you have to deal with change all the time, right? If you're going to inevitably have to have it on the college football and basketball landscape, I'm embracing it as a chance to, form new friendships, see new fan bases, new common sports traditions, new venues, all that. And then as the tectonic plates continue to shift underneath us, keeping one eye open that it's probably going to continue to evolve and change, but making the most of these different incarnations as we have them. 12, 13 years ago when TCU and West Virginia joined the league, some of those guys have become our best friends in the conference. I'm speaking from a broadcaster standpoint, with guys like Tony Creedy and Brian Estridge. And the same will be true with the new relationships we form with these 4 new schools, and one of which is a school coming back in Colorado. Mark Johnson, the voice of the Buffs, who I say has the voice of God, a very deep voice, Mark Johnson. Can't wait to get him back in the league. Can't wait to, go to new places for us, like going to Tucson and Tempe and obviously out to see Utah. And for us this upcoming season, from a Kansas scheduling standpoint, we didn't get to go to Provo in football or basketball last year. So I can't wait to see what BYU has to offer there. And so I'm embracing all the change. I'm one of those guys. I'm kind of a nerd. I have a running list of every stadium and campus I've ever broadcast a game on, and I'm trying to go to all of them before it's all said and done. The goal used to be, go to the Power 5 or Big 6 or whatever. I don't know what we'll be calling it in 20 years by the time I finish this list in terms of power whatever. We may just have 2 conferences at that point. But I'm trying to go to them all. And so I, for one, am loving the change. And I think if the common fan can get their mind wrapped around that as well and just be excited about chances to see new places and meet new people, is maybe the best way we can look at it. Because otherwise, if we get too swept up in what we're losing and saying goodbye to and old traditions that will be no more, it kind of steals your joy a little bit. So
Yeah.
I for one, am forward thinking and looking ahead to it.
Brian, great to have you on, man. Good stuff, and we'll be in touch again. Are you going to be at Big 12 Media Days in Vegas?
Yeah, it's going to be there, man. Can't wait. We'll see you guys out there.
We'll see you there. Thank you very much for your time. The voice of KU Athletics, Brian Hanni, with us on 365 Sports.